Yeah, it is. Oh, look, there's an outlet.
What?
All right, we're
There's an outlet.
well, maybe some people do. And
Oh, we're live?
yeah, we are live, and that's okay. All right, so I can't post that. Okay. So I guess we're live. There we go. And then, all right.
I need to get a haircut.
Yeah, you do. You especially, not me though.
Too busy in Lent. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody? Sound quality? All right. I'm just assuming everything's good. And then, okay, I can't do anything. All right, cool. We got 4 people. That's nice. All right. So,
is one of them my mother?
I don't know, but we have an outlet there, so that's going to be our centering piece. So we kind of had to make do with some of the timing, but that's what we got. So sorry about that. Let's see. I got some icons in here, but okay. Anyways, so today we're with Father Eric. We're going to be talking about questions, and he and I are going to be answering them. If you put them in the live stream, we will ask them if appropriate. So like nothing ridiculous where it's like, I don't know, what Father Eric thinks is in the mind of the Pope or something like that. Like, we're not going to take questions like that. But there's a lot that you can ask, and please ask them. Not to mention my wife as well. She recently converted. She was pagan. And so I know there's some people who have asked personally. And I know given that our culture is becoming more pagan and there's a lot of inner religious relations in the church, maybe you're asking for some advice. Like that's a possibility. But the main reason why we're here is to raise money for our adoration chapel. And it's a brand new chapel. We don't have, the building doesn't exist. We have the plans.
It's not brand new. It doesn't exist yet.
Yeah. Right. Like it doesn't exist. So we're trying to raise money for that. Our goal is 600,000, and right now we're at 450,000. So about 150,000 more. And we are, let's see. Yeah. So I've linked in the live chat as well, the description, where to donate and how to donate. And so if you feel called to donate, go ahead and do it. We would really appreciate it. Yes. If you want to just ask him questions, that's also fine. So go ahead and ask him questions. I mean, we have a list here, but if you want to utilize the live chat, that'd be great. So let's give people a second because there's a bit of a delay.
So you check it that way?
No, I've got a list of questions that my friends have asked and that I'm going to fill in because we don't have questions.
All right.
So, all right. So when and how? So this is from my friend Mark. He gave a list of questions, and I know some of them we've covered in another video, but I think this would also be helpful to do. When and how did you receive your call to become a priest?
Well, when was 2004? Yeah, so 20 years ago now. And well, it started on March 17th, 2004, when I had a reconversion. When a priest prayed with me after a mass, and I had a powerful sense of God's love for me. And yeah, it kind of changed everything that next day, or from that next day on. And initially, I didn't feel a call to the priesthood initially, but after a few months of, at that time now regularly going to mass, when it was hit and miss before that, going to confession regularly again.
Right.
And a prayer group at my home parish, the leader of that prayer group, probably about a couple months maybe 3 months after the reconversion, asked me to pray about the priesthood, or asked me if I have prayed about it. And I had been dating a young woman then for about 3 years. And, and I said, well, I think I'm supposed to be married. And he asked me if I would promise to pray about it. And I reluctantly said I would. I didn't want to, because in my mind, we were going to get married. Even though we weren't engaged yet then, but we were close.
Right.
And so I did pray about it. And then after about a month of doing that, it actually did start to strongly feel a call in that direction. Just like not, it's like your heart and mind, without trying to, is just start to kind of, I wouldn't say drift, but it kind of just starts to head in that direction when you're not really thinking about anything. And then all of a sudden, it's like my mind is just heading in that direction. And and then I met with a priest, and who's actually now the rector of the seminary, Father Steve Burr.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the first priest I met with. He was an associate at the time, and close by parish to my parents. And then he connected me with the vocation director, and for 8 months, like, I prayed about it, every day in an adoration chapel. He had me praying for an hour every day in front of our Lord in the Eucharist. In an adoration chapel, I'd go there after work. I worked at Volkswagen Audi at that point in the customer service, because I had a marketing degree, and that's part of marketing, not a big part of it. But anyway, so I'd go to that chapel after, and after about, the girl I was dating didn't know, nobody really knew I was considering it or praying about it for the first few months, because I didn't know how serious it was.
Right.
And I didn't want to tell the girl I was dating, because she had started RCIA, now OCIA, to become Catholic, and she was at Michigan State at the time. And so she also knows Father Joe Krupp.
Yeah.
And that's how
I was just thinking
that's
that,
how
she probably knows Father Joe.
Yeah, that's how I first met him, and he probably doesn't remember me, because it would have been very different at that time. And I didn't tell her at first, because I thought it might scare her away, until she told me she felt like she was dating a priest. And because
about that, that sounds that sounds
she was coming to the faith. Remember, although I had been lukewarm before the reconversion, I was like rediscovering my faith, and I was reading a lot of books, and so I was probably super intense. That's probably why she said it felt like she was dating a priest. She was just trying to. I remember going through a study guide for the Passion of the Christ with her, when we had watched it, and but I was reading like St. Augustine's Confessions, and I read a lot of C.S. Lewis in the beginning, and then move on to more heavier things. So I
have the Summa right up there.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, that was actually the Christmas gift I asked for my parents that Christmas, which came in handy, because they made us buy it in the seminary. So.
Oh really?
Yeah, especially because you start in philosophy first.
And that makes sense.
Yeah, and
that makes sense.
I didn't know exactly, so we were still dating, although it slowly was turning into a friendship, almost imperceptibly. And then I realized too that how much of it started even before the reconversion, because for me to get to the point of asking to even go to this mass, and then ask the priest to pray for me after, or pray with me after. That took a lot of influence of my mom not pushing me or anything, but
right,
just being available. And then before that, the girl I was dating asking me questions, because she had no knowledge of Christianity, as her parents were Buddhists, because she was from Hong Kong.
Right.
And she wasn't Buddhist, but just had no knowledge at all. And I'm sure that really started, and starting to read a lot of classic literature too, because I had a class in college. I started reading a lot of Dostoevsky
Right.
After that class, and then after that time, after about 8 months of discerning it, then I went on a discernment weekend, just a weekend I spent at the seminary, and I knew by then I had spent. I knew by then it was time to apply. Although I did spend like a weekend with the Jesuits.
Oh no!
No, I mean,
Oh no! Well,
because I wanted to check out a religious order, and
Mitch Pack was awesome.
oh yeah, I know.
It was
I mean, my spiritual
a very
director,
clear example.
my spiritual director in the seminary was a Jesuit, very very holy priest, very orthodox, very devout.
Mm.
But and I just realized, okay, I do believe I'm called to diocesan, but I wanted to give that at least a consideration.
Give it a try. That's cool.
And then I applied, but which you still didn't know you're accepted, and I applied in February 14th of 2005, and I didn't know I couldn't be dating at that point. I thought if you got accepted, you couldn't be dating.
Oh, okay.
But it was when you fill out the application, so I had to call my girlfriend that night and say, I think we're not dating anymore. And but I mean, it sounds funny, and
I mean, like
she knew it was coming. I mean, she sensed it more than I did.
So
like she had it was difficult, during that time though, because she'd be like, "Can't one of our sons be a priest?" And I said, "Oh, no, it doesn't work that way." Because it's like a temptation, like not blaming it on her, but but anyway, obviously we broke up then, and but my dad is her godfather because I was at her baptism, First Holy Eucharist, confirmation at
Right.
St. John's at Michigan State.
Yeah.
Like that Easter vigil, and so it was really amazing to see.
Was that at St. John's or St. Thomas's?
It was at St. John's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do that because they're like sister parishes.
Yeah, I don't know if that at that time though. I don't think it was as common.
Okay, because I went there in 2008, so yeah, like by that time they were like really involved. But so it's, I guess, when it comes to women, if you get friend zoned by a devout man while you're dating, he might become a priest. Is that the moral of the story?
Well, I mean,
no, I'm just kidding.
Consciously.
I know it wasn't consciously.
But yeah, I mean, because men are generally. I mean, some people might not like this, but it's not like a bad thing. It's just like men generally don't say, "Let's just be friends."
Yeah, that's not typically a man.
Because men are just like, "Okay, we're done." We're not going to be friends. But yeah, I mean that kind of naturally happened that way. But that is kind of funny because that's a good sign. Yeah.
Right, and all right. So for anyone who's watching who's new, if you have a question that you'd like to ask Father Eric or myself, go ahead and pop it in the live stream or the live chat, and we'll be happy to answer it. So I do have a question. Well, I have a question from some people on Twitter that I've gotten where they've asked, how would you describe the transformation of our parish? Because our parish was very, let's just say, stereotypical for a Novus Ordo, and now we're very not that way. And it's been a transformation. Like how could you describe like your methodology of how to do that? Now I'm not saying like, all right, so I'm gonna wait 5 years and then I'm gonna go ad orientem or something. Like that's not what I'm saying. But like in terms of like,
I didn't really have a methodology.
Right.
Where it's not wrong to have a methodology. I don't really have one. It was more of there's things that I would know that I would love to see. As a seminarian, you're always thinking about, when you buy your vestments, I want vestments to have symbols on the back of them.
Right.
Just in case, so that ad orientem is a big thing, which people don't know. It's especially in the year 2000, the congregation, dicastery now, for divine worship, it said that the Vatican has no preference for whether the priest faces the people or faces God.
Well, right, and I was just using that as an example because.
But yeah, I mean, so that's always in my mind. But as I start as a priest, and but it's not like at all costs this is going to happen. It's the primary way I did it is okay. Jesus to show me what to do and when to do it, and when to have a sense of doing it. Don't allow me to hold back from doing something just because I'm afraid of losing people. But also don't let me become prideful and do something just so I feel like I'm standing up to my own standards or whatever.
Right.
Because you want to bring as many people as you can to understanding something, but at the same time, you don't want to just wait until nothing, wait until a time where you do nothing.
Right.
So a lot of it happened, like, I mean, I'm not going to talk about everything, but the big thing first was we're removing a stained glass wall that was in front of the tabernacle. That was like the.
Well, so you think that's the biggest thing? From my perspective, because we ended up going to your first mass or one of your first masses there, and it really struck me when before the Eucharistic prayer, you came out and you were just like, you gave this little short 2-minute spiel about how we were supposed to kneel. And you did it in such a like what I would say like the proper way, where it wasn't like you weren't like you're a bad person if you do it. You very much sent the point home that you understood why you guys were doing it, like why the parish was standing during the Eucharistic prayer, but that the germ specified otherwise, and that we were supposed to kneel.
I was confused too that weekend.
Right, but like
you're probably at one of my second or third mass then.
Right, but it was like very well done.
Because the first mass, I was just confused. I didn't know why people weren't kneeling.
Right,
and I said, "Please kneel."
But like, there's so many parishes I've been to where that is actually like the case. Where like in Kalamazoo, there was a few where the priest did not want to clarify to the congregation for some reason. Like they just didn't want to. They were either scared or they thought they would come off too hard. And it's like the way you said it was very like direct to the point, but also you weren't like condemning anybody. And I think that was like really good.
That was
like as a feedback, as a guy who was there. Like I was
confused, and it was kind of good because people after, I remember that first weekend, people had said, "Father, thank you for reminding us to kneel. We haven't done that in 10 years or something."
Oh my god!
And I'm not trying to make like some judgment on anybody there, like because I didn't honestly. I just thought maybe they were confused because I was new there and everything was new, and I thought maybe
right.
But it turned out decently well at least then. But for me, the moment I arrived there, I was like, oh, this dumb wall. In front of the tabernacle.
Right.
So like the tabernacle's huge. It's in the middle of the church already, but there's a wall in front of it. Yeah, and I understand because Saint Basil is an Eastern saint.
Yeah.
Eastern, from Turkey, and there's iconostases if people are aware of that in the Eastern rites. But iconostases have doors that open.
Yeah, there's a very clear thing.
Yeah.
Any divine liturgy, like I think the Ukrainians.
And I was amazed. Like it was a year and a half after I was there, I think, that I started telling people.
I think we're going to take these away.
Well, I just said like we're going to call it "I want to see Jesus."
Yeah.
And I was amazed at how many people were just thrilled that I was getting rid of the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we had those stained glass framed, and then we had them hung up somewhere until we got these stained glass film up on the windows in the last 2 years.
All right, so
but the kneeler started from you.
From me?
Yeah, asking me if I could put out a kneeler for those who wanted to kneel receiving communion, and I said I don't know if I want to put out for just one person, but it's not going to hurt to put it out.
There was at least a second person in a different mass.
Yeah. And it was great because most people were just like, "Well, Father, that's great that you're doing that to accommodate people." And I'm like, "Yes, yes." And but then when the pandemic came, things took off.
Oh yeah. Because
it became, I started doing adoration on one of the live stream masses.
Right.
I think I did it on all of them.
You started on Tuesday.
No, Tuesday. Yeah, I started doing it on Tuesdays.
I kept pestering you.
During during the live streaming part of it, when there wasn't masses available for people. But we had confessions and exposition. We actually had more exposition going on then because nobody had everyone else to go.
Right, yeah.
You know,
The only one in the Vicariate, if I
well,
remember.
I don't know about that, but I mean, St. Isaac Jogues, for example, had a lot of confessions going on. And like I say, I'm not interested in trying to figure out why other places,
I'm not.
do it.
Yeah, I'm not.
But,
I'm not saying. I'm just saying.
but I do know the Archbishop, multiple times really asked us to step up the amount of confessions we were making available during that time, and that's why I started. I mean, we already had daily confessions, but the first week I started, we already started confessions before all the daily masses, which took like a year and a half before people started actually utilizing it. But
right.
But when that pandemic came, or mostly the lockdown stuff, more than the pandemic, people were looking for places to go to confession.
Yeah.
So that a lot of people started to know about the parish.
Yeah, we blew up during that time.
Yeah, because of that, the we don't have a very big parish.
Yeah,
it's pretty small, but we do it compliments on. We're not trying to just do a lot of things just to do a lot of things, but we get compliments on the amount of things that go on for the size of the parish. But people are, but the vast majority of the things we do are because people ask me.
Right.
And then I, pray about it. And so some part of that is the prayer is like, if multiple people are asking me about something, that can be a good sign, to start doing something.
Right.
Or that it's time, or and there's some things I didn't even think about doing that we're doing, or that we have in the church, like the stained glass film on the windows. I didn't even know that existed.
And then someone just suggested
because like $100,000 to get actual stained glass is just not an option.
Right.
But $10,000.
We'd have another fundraiser for that, right?
Yeah. And maybe eventually when that. When the length of the life of what those are supposed to be, you can usually add 5 years onto what they say it's supposed to be. Right. So, but maybe by then we could get like physical ones, But if they last a long time, I'm happy with that too.
So, the moral of the story is.
But in the Adoration Chapel, we actually have, just so people know, because this is a fundraiser.
Yeah.
We do have I don't know if you want to call them antique. But they're probably from the 1800s stained glass windows that we got of St. Catherine of Siena receiving the crown of suffering.
Oh, okay.
And then St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Catherine of Siena in another window.
Oh, that's so good.
And so we have to.
That's great.
So I do need somebody. Well, the artist that just did the painting project in the church, I think he knows somebody that restores stained glass windows. But
all right,
that will be actual physical stained glass windows in the chapel. So people know that because they're in my basement and garage right now.
Okay, I wish I could show you. I can't show you right now. But from what he previously said, as the lady, make sure you support good priests. Whether that's asking questions or saying that you're able to support them, because, as he said, a lot of the things came from questions and.
Yeah, it's trying to figure out, and I encourage people, the priests rely, if some of them may not say it, they rely on what the people say and suggest. That doesn't mean the priest is going to do everything you suggest. But as we were talking about the church, let me at least show this, if this works at all.
Yeah.
So you'll see 2017, that's about, it's almost clear. It's probably going to go black soon. But anyway, the 2017 is the top one, and then, you can also look on the website.
Yeah, it's out of focus, but
it's on the website too.
I would like to get to the questions that we're getting in the live chat. So the first one is from Kyla. Kyla is asking a complex question: can someone who has unknowingly been baptized incorrectly as an infant, which is actually common, are there other sacraments, including priestly ordination, that's valid? So she said that this actually happened to a priest, and his bishop had him redo all his sacraments.
Well, yeah, as a priest in this diocese, Father Matt Hood had to do that.
Okay, so like, yeah, you would. So if you knew, so correct me if I'm wrong. If you knew that you were baptized by someone in such a situation,
Or
well, I guess if they
attempted to be baptized,
yeah,
I guess
then they did not receive the grace. That was like our first video that we did together, right? Like they didn't.
I think so.
Yeah, they didn't receive the grace, and so they have to, like, if you say in the names of the Father and the Son and I don't know, the Spirit, like that's a problem.
Although the
there's
more
a formula.
The more common would be in the name of the Creator and Sanctifier and Redeemer.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
which isn't valid.
Yep. And so that you're not actually baptized in that situation. And
but in his situation, it was simply that he said, "We baptized you," instead of "I baptized you."
Yeah, and that was
enough to make it invalid.
Right, and that's a huge discussion because the reason, if I remember from the video, and obviously you can correct me because you're the one that does these, saying "we" is to displace an understanding of how you're being baptized, because it's not "we" as in like the people baptizing. It's
in the name of Jesus.
I in the name of God, because that and you have Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That's why you say in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So, and so it's about understanding the Trinity, and that's why it's important, because it's a direct expression of the grace from the Trinity. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, while we were talking.
Are you gonna correct? Was I wrong? Or
no?
No. Okay, thank you. Okay.
While we were talking, I was able to find the pictures.
Oh, there it is.
One of the stained glass windows. And
we're going old school with this.
Well,
no, because we don't have. Yeah, I don't have a system.
There's one of the other ones. It's a little washed out from the lighting, but
it looks really nice.
Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to do that because I said I would.
So we have another one from my wife. All right. I shouldn't have said that. Whatever. All right. So, is it inappropriate to kneel at any point in the Mass?
I don't know where the document is. So, but I do know there's a document for the Vatican. I don't know when it was, but I am almost completely positive that there was a document that said Catholics can kneel anywhere they want in the Mass. Or
even during the proclamation of the Gospel, which we're supposed to stand.
I don't know. I haven't ever. Well, maybe not then. Maybe I don't know. Maybe out of humility, it's good to stand there, but because you're standing there because out of reverence, because you're being proclaimed to you.
Right, and so like that's how I understood.
But
that's
from what I'm aware of it, I don't know if it even mentions that. I think it might mention that kneeling is permitted through the entire Mass for the laity. Now, I wouldn't encourage people to regularly do that all the time, because one practical reason is it can cause confusion. It can just cause a lot of confusion for what we are normally asked to do.
Could I give you an example?
Plus, you can emphasize the importance of kneeling at certain points when you're not kneeling the whole time.
Right.
Otherwise, you can kind of lose that.
So
I don't think you can say you can't do it.
So, like during the Sanctus, Holy, Holy, Holy.
Some people kneel right.
Some people kneel right at the beginning. Yeah, that's exactly where I was going.
I think that's because it comes from the old rite.
Right.
And I don't. I mean, I don't see it because I'm not facing.
You're not facing the people.
but I sometimes I do during the Agnus Dei, when I'm going to get the Holy Eucharist from the tabernacle. I don't bother correcting people on that because. But if it's as long as people, we are supposed to.
I don't know if it's in the germ.
We are. We do kneel at the end of it.
Yeah.
But as long as the people who are doing it in the beginning, as long as you're not like trying to chastise somebody for not kneeling in the beginning, because that would actually be incorrect. Because because that would be, the rubrics for the Novus Ordo or the ordinary form, are the rubrics for the ordinary form,
Right.
And even if we might think that something might seem better another way, if it's clear, you got to do it.
Right. It's kind of like the whole, like when people say the rosaries at certain points in the Mass, and it's like, I don't think you're supposed to be saying the rosary at this time because.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into that too much.
Well, right.
Because some people, if you get used to saying the rosary so much and so often, you can do it and not even be completely engaged in everything else. So
yeah, it could be one of those.
I remember a priest, Monsignor Trapp, who just passed away recently. God rest his soul. I remember when we were in the Holy Land, he'd be praying the rosary almost all the time. And he could have, and he could still pay attention to what people are saying. But he would you'd see it in his hand like virtually all the time. Not during Mass, I can't say that, but I mean, like just when we're walking around in the old city or.
Yeah, so like it'd be like during the contemplative parts of the Mass, like.
Now I don't. This is I don't, and I'm aware of it. I don't know.
Any restriction.
I could be wrong.
Right.
I could easily be wrong, but I'm not. I just don't recall anything in the general instruction room. This was going to say.
Yeah.
That says anything about not praying the rosary. Now, I mean, it is bad if they're like, okay, I'm going to start Mass. Okay, I'm going to just pray. I'm going to get through all my prayers. All my prayers I say every day. That would definitely not be a good idea.
Right, because at that point,
because you're making it just your personal time,
right,
and not the sacrifice of the Mass.
Right, because the sacrifice of the Mass is supposed to be communal, not.
Yeah, communal. Communal, as in there's certain prayers that you say. Like there's responses.
Well, I mean, so like so like a Mass is inherently
you want to be engaged. And the best way you're engaged is by praying.
Right.
Like not necessarily by external things you're doing.
But
by praying, but the most engagement you can have with the Mass is by praying.
Yeah. So, all right. Again, anybody who'd like to add a question in the live chat, just let us know. I've got some questions from people that I know. But if you are at home or wherever you're at, on a bus stop, I don't know, just put it in the live chat and we'll discuss it. And I'll ask him. What? What do you mean a bus stop?
Strong Catholic conservatives need to reclaim the cities. That sounds like a joke.
No, it doesn't sound like a joke.
But the family I visited in Pittsburgh, the strong Catholic family, like 3 of their daughters go to Hillsdale. I don't know if they're not from Michigan. Hillsdale is like one of the most conservative universities. It's not religious, but it's basically run by Catholics.
Yeah.
And one of them lives in Grand Rapids. Not granted, Grand Rapids is probably one of the only larger conservative cities, but it's not completely conservative. But they purposely want to reclaim, like they really are encouraging people to try to reclaim, like to bring morality, to bring conservative values. I don't mean like political, but I mean like conservative, like true conservative moral values into cities. And maybe that's a sacrifice. People might not have as much privacy, but
right. And Damien, I do see your question. We are going to get to it because that is a question I actually have too. But we'll get to that in a second. Because like you have St. Joseph's Shrine. It is in a very problematic. In Detroit, like there's a lot of problematic areas, but I mean, it is when you go there, the surrounding neighborhood, like I mean, there's blight there. Okay, like there is blight.
But to be fair, you are much more you are much more terrified than I would.
No, it's not about terrified. No, it's not about terrified.
Whoever hears probably has to go in between both of our views. I might be a little too lax about it, and you might be a little too intense about it.
No, but like
but it is an area that's been fixed up a lot.
Yeah, it has been fixed up a lot, and part of that is because of the church.
Even if a place looks nice, it can still have a lot of crime.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm not even talking about crime. I'm saying like it just looks destitute. It looks terrible aesthetically. And
not as much that area, but not very far from it.
Right. But like to allow for like families to live there and like good schools to go to. Like that is a very serious problem.
Well, a lot of them homeschool, so maybe.
Well, right. A lot of them do homeschool, and I suggest.
Do you know of any people like from St. Joseph that have moved down there?
They have, from what I know, there is serious talk about groups of people that go there going to
That would be great.
like move around the area.
That'd be
So they're
awesome.
doing exactly what you're suggesting, and I think that is wonderful. But there is also like, you don't want to end up like Lot, be put in a situation where like you're surrounded by criminals. I say criminals, but like I don't mean it that way. I mean just a very dangerous spot. And by how you live could be an indication of like it's
surrounded by a word that starts with an S and ends with ites. You're talking about Lot.
No, you're right. But I'm not. I mean, you're right. Like, but I'm saying
know if, like,
I'm not going that
trigger
specific.
something.
No. Well, right. No, and I'm glad you didn't. But like, it's not that. It's not at that level. It's just danger. Just on a danger level, because especially if you have family, like if you have kids.
Of course.
And so, but like, yeah, everything else, I think you're correct on. If you're willing to take that risk, and you feel, especially if you feel called to,
or if you're in a city that's not quite as dangerous. Well, almost every city is a little dangerous.
If it's blue, yeah.
If there's more, yeah.
If it's not dangerous already, it's going to be.
If the mayor,
especially with sanctuaries,
if the mayor doesn't believe in,
but that is political
law.
Just we're not going to get into politics.
Well, I mean, just without it being political, like just the end, like it is immoral to purposely not punish crime.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to go to Damien, which, by the way, Damien, that is exactly how we spell my son's name. So it's a good name. And it sounds Polish, so I'm also Polish. Anyways, question. If a priest preaches heresy during the homily, can you stand up and correct the priest? And in particular, at St. John's, that is a great question, because in particular at St. John's, not Father Joe, but another priest that was there, he did the miracle of sharing, which has been expressly condemned as something you're not supposed to say.
Wait, who's condemned? I mean, I don't like it either.
No, it's a condemned like homily. Like you can't actually do a homily on, because I ended up, it was either Catholic Answers or somewhere else where they like the miracle of sharing is not a thing. It is a heresy to interpret that.
I don't know if I don't like it, and I think it's stupid, but
because it denies. No, it's a heretical. It is because it denies the miracle of Jesus.
If you're
multiplying the
explicitly denying that miracle, yes.
Because what he said was, well, what if it wasn't
but
Jesus
even though
doing
it's stupid,
well,
you could say it's sharing.
No, listen to this example. So I remember him saying, well, what if it wasn't Jesus that multiplied the bread, but it was just everyone choosing to share the rations they had. Okay. And it was like, okay, no, that's not.
I mean, I know you're saying that so people hear it.
Right, yeah. So they understand the context, because I think I've totally
indirectly denies it, at least derives the miraculous nature.
Right, because that's the
even
problem.
though I think it's stupid. I think you could say the sharing, that somebody gave what they had, and then Jesus miraculously multiplied it.
Well, no, that's what the little boy did with the fish.
You usually don't hear those two things together.
Right. Like that's what the little boy did with the fish. Okay. Here's my 2 fish, and he multiplied that.
So to get you said what Damien said, right?
So I'm using an example. I'm using a specific example of a general question he's asking, which is, if a heresy is being promoted in the homily, can you get up and correct him, or?
I would say no.
No.
Could you imagine that? What if somebody determines that something's a heresy and it's not a heresy?
Yeah.
Or just the fact that you're interrupting the mass is in itself a problem. And, outside of the mass, I think it'd be different because the people who are hearing the heresy may not hear the correction, may not hear the truth unless you say it at the moment. But the problem is, during a homily, which takes place during the mass, you're interrupting the mass,
right?
So, and the only person I've ever had interrupt me before was because I was preaching against abortion, and it didn't go well for that person. Not like because the ushers or the Knights of Columbus came and escorted her out, but it's if somebody's preaching, if a priest is preaching, now I will say you should talk to the priest after. You definitely need to talk to the priest after. and hopefully maybe he'll correct himself publicly, or you encourage him to do so.
So what
Because
is
he may not know, maybe he just says something wrong, and the interruption, I think, is one of the worst parts of it, because the distraction, I don't know, like, I couldn't encourage people to do that, because
so I guess my question is,
it's still the
say
mass.
for example, so okay, all right, so this may be too in the weeds, where it's like, all right, so maybe someone's fluffing it and saying the wrong words, but you just need to correct it. What if someone brings up the like Nestorian heresy in the middle of the homily? Would it be appropriate, like, separating the natures of Jesus, man, I'm just for, I know you understand what that is, but for that is the rejection of Jesus as God and man. And so it's one of the reasons why we call Mary the Theotokos.
His natures being united.
Yeah, his natures are united in the person of Christ. So if a priest comes out and says in the homily that Jesus was a man and that he worshipped God and were to be like him, but he was not God. Like, that's an extreme case. I totally get that it's an extreme case, but to his point, I'm trying to do the, we talked about St. Thomas Aquinas earlier, so I'm just trying to see the gauge here.
Most priests who preach heresy aren't going to be that precise in preaching heresy.
Right, but would it be appropriate, maybe not to interrupt him, but to just stand up and leave and find another parish if you can?
Oh, I mean, that's your choice there. That's different. That's a completely different matter. But,
okay.
Although people don't know why you're leaving. Or you might just be going to the bathroom.
I mean, if I were to like all of a sudden tell Mandy and our 5 kids just to get up and leave,
I think you have a duty. I think you have a duty to say something to the priest. As uncomfortable as it is, I think you have to say something after.
So, okay.
No matter what, I think.
No matter what it is, you have to say something.
Not after. At that point necessarily. At that point, I don't want to. I mean,
I'm not active.
I don't want to encourage people to be like doing this, but
right.
I mean, if you really sense the Lord wants you to say something, I don't know who am I to judge you for doing that?
Who am I to judge?
But I wouldn't. I'd say generally, like, you should err on the side of not doing that, because of the contention that could create just as bad of a problem.
Right.
I wouldn't say worse, but I mean, because it's the mass. I mean, that's the biggest problem, I think, is because it's the mass. Now, one thing, if a priest says the wrong words of consecration, you should just say, "Father, I think you made a mistake." And I can say that because I've had somebody do that.
Right there.
Because I had somebody do that, and I'm glad they did.
Right.
Because there was like one time I was just extremely tired, and I think it was like this, and I was extremely tired. It's all and I think I skipped ahead to the words of the problem is when you're looking. Most people aren't going to know this. When you're looking at the Roman Missal, depending on the publication it is, if you have the consecration of the bread into the body and the blood, or the wine into the blood, on the same page, the brain tends to look at the one that's closest to you, which is on the bottom.
Right.
And sometimes I have to consciously make sure I'm not looking at the consecration for the wine first.
Right.
The ones that separate them on 2 separate pages, it's easier to not make that mistake. But I was really tired, and I had started saying the consecration for the wine, and and a parishioner said, "Father, I think you're saying the wrong prayer." And then I realized it, and I said, I don't know if he even said thank you, but I thanked him after anyway. But and it wasn't Ryan. But
yeah, it was me.
But I so like, okay, because that is very important. Like, and it's not contentious. It's just making sure that that's going to be a valid mass.
Right. Because
and priests can make mistakes because they're human beings.
Yeah.
So I'd say in that case, you definitely want to say something.
All right. I see your next question. I'm just reiterating. If you're new here and you're watching us, if you have a question for Father Eric or for me, just ask away in the live chat. We've had quite a few good questions come up, and keep them coming. This is a fundraiser for an adoration chapel. So
Perpetual adoration chapel.
yeah, a perpetual adoration chapel. The description and as well as the live chat is where you'll be able to go to it, and I have instructions on where to go. If you feel called to donate, we would love and appreciate that donation from you. And thank
If
you
you
very
can't
much.
donate, please pray.
Yes.
Too.
Yeah, because we could always use prayers.
Because as somebody told me, if you're going to start an adoration chapel, Satan's going to go after you more.
Yep.
And it's going to usually be in ways that aren't, like, God won't allow it to be too ridiculous, but they're obnoxious. Like, all these things have been falling apart in the parish in the last few months. Like, all these things have to be repaired all the time.
Oh yeah,
like more than usual.
But we have a beautiful mural of, what was it, Saint Gregory, Saint Basil, and
Saint Basil, Saint Gregory of Nyssa, his brother, and Saint Gregory Nazianzen, his best friend.
Yeah, so those yes, and so
a lot of those things were going on while that was being done, so it might have also been that too.
Yeah, so that was really nice. All right, so here, Damien's second question: at what point does an act of reparation become too severe and cross over to a sin?
Okay, well, I looked at that question so I could think about it a little more.
Okay.
I was reading it because I've been reading the comments. I would say, I'm sure when he's asking this question, he knows there's no absolute answer. But if you're performing an act of reparation, people don't know an act of reparation is basically, trying, a recognition that sin is an injustice, and you're trying to balance the injustice, especially if it's so you're stepping in the breach and asking God to accept your like sacrifice or prayer, fasting, whatever it may be, as you're kind of saying, Lord, please accept this because either for my own sins in the past or especially for other people's sins, who will not repent,
Right.
who do not repent, and hopefully that reparation could lead them to repentance, but also even if it doesn't, it helps to diffuse the injustice and balance things out, balance justice again. So I would say an act of reparation, when it becomes too severe, when it comes to, there's a general principle that I'm going to use the example of self-mortification, physical mortification. John Paul II was known to use a type of whip.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, as mortification. Now, this really explains it well, I think. The whip was basically, I don't know if it was leather but there are knots tied at the end. If it causes lasting damage, that's too far.
Yeah.
If it just causes pain temporarily and very minor, maybe reddening, then that's not too far.
Okay.
However, you also want to make sure you have the right understanding if you're doing that.
Right.
Now, most reparation doesn't need to be physical. I would say I would say you should reach I don't know. Most people who are saints don't know that they've reached a high level of sanctity. But I'd say you'd want to be much more advanced before you start doing the physical. Unless you count it working out. Let's say you hate working out. That's definitely something you can use as a physical mortification as reparation.
I just have a few examples too. Like St. Patrick. So you have to make sure I'm not giving you medical advice. I'm just being very clear about that. St. Patrick, before trying to help convince kings and the feudal lords and the pagans, right? King, yeah. What he would do is he would actually the night before take a cold bath in ice, and it was like I mean they didn't have warmers like we do, and so the idea of taking a bath in
dangerous.
Ice, yeah, very dangerous. And
I'm assuming he probably didn't warm up in front of a fire after.
I mean, I'm sure he'd done enough to understand that probably wasn't great, but to switch his body temperature so fast. But well, I mean, because that can yes, and so
like when you're trying to thaw out your fingers.
Yeah, it's like the same thing. You don't want to put it under hot water, and so so there's an example, but like what he said, don't be stupid about
It's
it.
generally that you're not going to do something that's going to cause lasting damage. Many saints would say later on that they regretted the austerities that they practiced when they were younger. And a lot of them probably died earlier because of the austerities.
Right.
Especially stomach problems were very common, from extreme fasting. But at the same time, it's like they still became saints. So, but they, in a sense, they repented of overdoing it.
Right.
Even though they meant
that is humility, though.
Yeah.
Like that is humility, and it's humility in an area where people would be like, you could be prideful in faith, and I think that's awesome. Like just from that angle. All right. So I see Mandy's and Damien's question. I also want to promote, if you can share this, where you can share this on Twitter or Facebook or wherever is hip, I guess. I'm usually on Twitter, so I don't typically go to Facebook. That would be cool. But also liking would be appreciative. I'm not going to ask you to subscribe. I mean, that's up to you. But
let me ask you something.
Yes. Because you've been getting all these questions.
And I don't mean this to be super long. Why do a lot of YouTubers ask you to hit the bell notification? Does that somehow help them?
Yeah, it does.
Well, how?
So, all right. So what ends up happening is when you subscribe.
Like when I watch Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, like why do they mention the bell?
So the bell is a forced trigger that when you, on the back end, that when you upload, you trigger to everybody who's done the bell. They are going to see your image on their initial browse screen when they go to YouTube.
Okay.
But when you just subscribe, well, they may see it. So it's a.
But it helps. But how does that help? Does YouTube does that
because it forces it in front of you.
So it automatically is recording that, hey, this person's watching this.
I really like because it's based off your history. So it's based off your browsing history, and when you go to someone you've never watched before, and you hit the bell, you're like, I want to see new stuff of this guy every single time. Oh, that is what it says, because historically you don't have that data.
It really goes up. It really, so the advantage to the person who has the channel is it makes it look, even if the person isn't consciously doing it, they're kind of unconsciously clicking on their video.
Yeah, this doesn't happen so much on my channel, but on this channel. But I have a statistics channel where people do that, and so that's.
Okay. I didn't want it to be too long.
No, that's fine. Okay, so let's go to Mandy's question. What happened? All right, so going back to the consecration, what happens if you do misspeak? Is it the same thing as the wee baptism? Does it become it's not a valid consecration?
Yes, that's correct. It wouldn't be valid. And there's times where I wasn't sure. Let's say I was saying the words, and where you don't have a choice to cough when you choke on your spit or whatever that's called.
Yeah.
Where sometimes I'll just start over again. Or I don't think I've ever sneezed during the words, but if I sneeze, I would go back and just start. It's not a very long sentence anyway, but
right.
I would just go back and start again.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, and I guess a follow up might be, all right. So
because the absolute words are "Hoc est enum corpus meum," for this is my body. If those words are not said,
so if for example I go and I can't hear what the priest is saying, sometimes you guys will whisper and you won't be very loud about it. If I go and I have no idea that you screwed up, am I covered under the day of obligation?
Of course.
All right, just making sure, because some people...
God doesn't hold something against you that you don't know.
Okay.
But even if the priest does mess up, you would still be covered.
Okay.
Because your intention wasn't to go to a mass that was going to be invalid.
Right.
Unless you knew it was invalid and you didn't care and you just said, I don't care, I like this because this is what I like. So the words do matter immensely, but that's why the church spent so much time too trying to figure out the exact words that were absolutely necessary,
right?
To make sure they could dispel that fear.
And if people, so it's a matter of It's a matter of justice that it happens.
Yeah.
So it's because
if a priest deliberately did it, which the majority of the time, they probably don't deliberately do it, but if they deliberately do it, then they're very much in trouble by God.
all right.
God's angry and he doesn't show up. This is what a priest in the diocese would say. If it's invalid, God's angry and he doesn't show up. If it's illicit, he shows up, but he's angry.
Okay.
no,
yeah, that's good. At
the priest,
So Damien with the questions. This is awesome. So I don't want to give you the impression that you're asking too many questions. So question number 3. Since Christ told us that those who hold another in lust commit adultery, does one commit a sin of practicing magic by pretending to play a game like D&D?
Wait, okay. I just want to make sure so I'm imagining he's asking, a man who lusts after a woman in his heart has already committed adultery.
Yes.
I'm sure that's what he's referring to. Now, even when we say that too, obviously it isn't exactly the same though as the act of adultery. That's even worse.
Right.
It is still bad though.
Yeah, it's still more sin.
Or if he plans, especially if he plans to commit adultery and something out of his power stops him from doing it, then it would be just as bad.
Right.
Now, it's still bad in the heart if somebody lusts after somebody, but clearly you can't say it's at the same level as if you actually decided that you're going to commit the act of adultery, or if you commit it. Now, okay, so does one commit a sin of practicing magic, so this is idolatry instead of adultery, by pretending to playing a game like Dungeons and Dragons? Like some people may not like my answer, but it's first of all, you have to know enough about what you're talking about to be able to give an answer.
Right.
Like I know a decent surface enough about Dungeons and Dragons where I don't know if you can absolutely say that every time that somebody's committing this sin, but I know it's very dangerous. Because it's a role play game. You can easily get sucked into it, really get super involved in it. But if you're like, I don't know. I mean, you would know more than I would because I never played it. But I know people. I know a lot of people who have played it. And I'm not talking about like the video game. Like there's a video game where you just hack at monsters. Like that. That's not the same thing.
So I ended up playing a tabletop game on last Thursday with my friends, and I was a dwarf cleric paladin, and I had a move called Angelic Light that I did, and I rolled a D6 plus 2 damage.
Okay.
But that speaks to
I'm just saying okay, because I don't fully understand.
Right, so like I'm not casting a spell in the sense that I'm using.
You're making a decision.
Like
you're making a decision on what you have.
I'm using. I'm playing a game. I'm role playing, but I'm not like. So like I would actually argue because like you read Catholic Answers, you read them. They get into the nuance, basically what you're saying, in the sense that you need to be able to like not go too deep, and
there's people know this is specifically we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons,
right? So like
I'm not talking about a Ouija board where no matter what you do in the Ouija board,
that's evil.
You've already opened yourself up.
But if I'm playing, for example, a hunter in Dungeons and Dragons, like what spell am I doing? Like what am I doing? I'm doing attacks, and so like those.
Okay.
Well, right.
But even if I call them, let's talk about somebody who's like somebody who's like a drow. Isn't that like an elf or something? Oh no.
So we'll just say some magician.
There's something like drow elf or something where it's like a dark elf or something.
Okay. Sure.
Like
I have no idea.
Who I would think if it's an elf, they're basically using a lot of magic. Or somebody who's just. But even if they're using a spell, it doesn't mean the same thing as.
So it's not
what
like
you're saying.
So I guess I would get to the point of all right. So are they trying to actually cast a spell with? Are they saying something where it's like, I do a fireball, I'm going to roll D6 now.
No, right. But that's what
happens in D&D.
Yeah,
But if I'm
of
going,
course, people
if I'm
could
going,
get so
well,
involved. in
right,
it.
that's what I'm getting at. If I'm like, all right, I'm gonna say some Latin gibberish stuff, and I'm getting into that. Okay, I would say like that's problematic. Like you
Yeah,
shouldn't be
'cause
doing that. Like
even if it's gibberish, your intention
Right.
is to try to call upon hidden powers
because I
that
think
aren't from God.
the problem comes with the problem comes with intention. Like this is like a situation like so like in moral law there's three understand like there's three requirements. There's intent, situation, and the action itself. So if by me pretending to be, let's just say, an elf mage, I I think that's something in D&D because I don't play D&D. I play something similar to D&D called Master's Tale. But it's if I'm doing an elf mage and I want to do a fireball attack, and it's just I'm saying fireball attack, roll d6, roll d12,
Yeah, clearly
something
that's not.
that's not it. But if you're doing something where I am actively trying to get real, like I'm getting so involved that I'm actually trying to create a spell,
Which is not impossible that people could do
right,
that.
right, but like
With
that's
imagination, especially the younger the person is, the more
right because they're gonna
be careful. Yeah.
because then at that point I think you've crossed a line in terms of intent. Because if the intent is simply okay, well I'm playing a mage and I'm just having a fun time with my friends. We're doing the mechanics like because that's how people talk about
yeah, that's a good.
they talk. These are mechanics, and I'm just simply going through the motions of them. But if I'm then adding on top of the mechanics something like I guess the best thing is like Harry Potter language of saying spells, then that is a problem.
Yeah, if they're actual spells, or if your intent is to. Now there are some things just to make sure it's clear to give. There are other things that doesn't matter what your intent is.
Yeah, it's the action itself.
The danger, like on a Ouija board.
Yeah.
Even if you think it's a joke, it doesn't matter. Now, the level of sinfulness, if you don't realize how dangerous it is, and you don't intend to have something take place, yeah, you're not going to be committing as grave of a sin as you would be if you knew how dangerous it was.
Right.
But an Ouija board is the whole purpose of it is to supposedly contact dead spirits, which is very rare that's going to happen with it not being a demon, if God permits a demon to even be involved.
If you want to know more about the crazy history of the Ouija, sorry, I've got like a burp coming up. Sorry. So if you want to know more about the crazy history of like a Ouija board specifically, I know it's a tangent from what we talked about with the D&D.
Not that much of a tangent. So.
But yeah. So like the Exorcist Files with Father Martins. Carlos Martins, who's in our archdiocese. He's an exorcist here.
He's a companion of the cross, just to be clear.
Right. He's So he's a religious order, but he is here in the archdiocese of Detroit. And on that show, talking about the Ouija board, there's an example of it wasn't outright possession, but it was a really good history as to how the Ouija board came, as well as like what could happen even if you're just screwing around. And so I'm not going to tell you the details because I do, I would suggest you go and watch the episode because I think they do a really good job with that. All right, so the next question. Sorry, anybody who's new, if you want to throw a question in the live chat, we have been here an hour, but we're still going. If you want to ask more questions, go ahead, and we'll read them in the live chat and we'll answer them. So the next question is last question. What is the greatest virtue in a saint, in your opinion? I'm sorry. Can a priest? Right. He misspoke. Okay, so he has another question, but
I don't know if I misspoke. Does that mean that?
Well, no, like he has
question instead.
No, the last question.
He misspoke last.
That it was the last question. That's
well. I'm gonna say it's an easy one. Humility.
Humility, because the greatest one is pride. The greatest sin is pride.
Yeah. Humility is without a doubt the greatest virtue, and because it's so fundamental to how to even receive graces from God, we need to be humble. Humility is really living according to the truth of who you are in reality and who you are before God. So that doesn't mean that you pretend that you're worthless. Like that's not humility either.
That's actually still bad.
Yeah, that's bad in a different direction.
Yeah.
But it's being very honest about like you are, who you are, your gifts, not denying what God's given you, but not inflating your gifts as if they come from you and not from God. And so humility is the bottom line of what would be the greatest virtue in a saint, because it's going to influence everything else.
Right.
No, I like the next one.
Okay, all right. Can a priest? I hope that answered it.
Well, I can't see that little heart.
Right, I know. It's like a
blocking
heart.
Carry. It says carry.
Can a priest carry a gun or weapon under canon law?
Well, no, the old canon law, 1917 code, a priest was not permitted to hunt because he wasn't permitted to shed blood.
Whoa.
That was the primary reason. The other reason was because hunting, unlike now, was viewed as like a very highbrow, like rubbing elbows with wealthy people. And,
yeah, it was a sport.
It's still a sport, but I mean.
In Michigan, we absolutely need it because we have so much deer that it actually becomes a hazard if we don't hunt them.
Well, now with ducks too, because I started doing duck hunting with some parishioners. I did some duck hunting, and goose hunting. With, unfortunately, we had a lot of frustrations against Canada geese. There were none that we could get.
And that is how recently. You say it. It's not Canadian geese. It's Canada geese.
Yeah, that's actually because you might have told me that recently. And
my wife says that's the only creation from the devil.
Which isn't true. But I mean,
yeah, I know. It's just.
But no, priests are permitted. To it doesn't say it in canon law that I'm aware of in the 1983 code, which is the current code in effect. But we are permitted to have guns, and I just shot another gun at my cousin's house the other day, a couple of them, and that was just target practice there. But he lives in the country, so it was a little more hillbilly-ish what we did, but but it wasn't illegal or anything. We did, but it probably looked a little more hillbilly to other people.
I grew up in a rural area, so like
I did not, so I appreciate the stuff even more.
Oh yeah, I used to there was one time I staffed a shooting range for a tournament.
And I know
a friend of mine asked me to help. I was like, I haven't shot before, but sure, I'll do it. And it was just fun to see everybody.
To give an example, he did say
priest.
Even though I'm trying to ignore that question because it could be a tough one to answer. Carry a gun. Can a priest carry a gun? Catholics are not just permitted but expected to reasonably defend yourself. Unless you feel that Jesus is calling you to give your life as a martyr. Right. But you're not going to be a martyr if somebody's just trying to steal money from you. Right. And that's why I'll tell people, I don't want somebody, I'm going to defend myself if they're just trying to steal from me. If they want to kill me because I'm a priest, okay.
Right.
Then I'm probably not going to defend myself. Because it might be a grace of martyrdom that God's giving me.
So I would say in relation to the previous question I was asked, where moving into areas that are dangerous and reclaiming cities, I think it would be completely reasonable for a priest to have something to defend himself. Yeah. Because, like you said, if someone's just stealing the tabernacle because it's made of gold, like that, and they know that you're in the way, and
if you're in the way, as I say, technically, you can't shoot somebody because they're stealing something. Unfortunately, no, I don't mean because they want to kill people, but
right.
But you can't. That's not self-defense unless, like you said, you're in the way.
Yeah,
and they're threatening you.
Right. Yeah. Because So I would think that there'd be a.
I'm going.
There's a clip.
I'm also going by what they do in training for concealed, pistol license. I'm also going by what that, and that makes sense because morally, too, it makes sense that it's going to be if you're threatened or somebody close to you is threatened.
Because there's a clip going around, and it's a priest and a deacon, and they're not doing anything. And there's this guy. I don't think he's wearing a shirt, but he has a giant knife, and he comes and he throws the Bible. He closes the Bible, takes it, and leaves. And the priest is just looking there helpless, and the deacon is also looking there helpless. And like correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, maybe that's actually like what you're thinking of when you asked that question, but it was, for me, like that was what came into mind when discussing this, because I mean, it is a very serious problem to have
because all of this is based on, like I said, fundamentally the fundamental right to self-defense.
Right.
It's whether it's a gun, whether it's your hands pushing somebody away, punching somebody if you have to.
Right.
Like it all comes down to self-defense. So even though tons of priests hunt, so we're not. I figure you're not just asking about hunting. That's why I'm not ignoring the difficult question.
Right.
Of self-defense. Thankfully during Mass, like it's best, the priest, because he needs to celebrate Mass, especially once he gets past that point. Once the offertory, once he starts to get into the preface prayers, like he can't end the Mass, willingly. I was at a parish once where the pastor had like a gushing nosebleed, and so like he couldn't continue. So somebody got me, and then I just picked up where he left off.
Oh, okay.
After I gave him the anointing of the sick, before we went to the hospital. But
yeah.
But otherwise, so it's better that other people are the ones, like ushers, are the ones that are primarily on the lookout, since the priest has, a very intense duty at that point, especially if you get to that part of the Mass where you can't stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all right. So I'm just loving these questions, Damien. Anybody else who has questions? You can be like Damien and just keep asking. It's completely fine. And there goes my wife. So great. Where does obedience to a bishop begin and end?
Well, if a bishop, I'm assuming you're asking with a priest.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be even more, it's going to be even more serious when you're talking about a priest who's made a public vow of obedience or promise of obedience, whereas the laity are also expected to obey the bishop. This is what it comes down to: is when a bishop orders a priest to do something that's legitimate, even if it's something that's imprudent, the priest probably should, out of justice, let the bishop know that he thinks it's imprudent. But if he still wants him to do it, then he needs to do it. Even if it's, even if it's something that's just might be stupid. Like it might be a bad decision. Now, if a bishop's asking a priest to do something that contradicts morality, canon law, the magisterium, that is, dictates that the Vatican itself has made decisions on, then you can't. It's not obedience. It's not a matter of obedience, because the bishop can't expect a priest to not follow the church.
Right.
And that can be a temptation, of course, because it's easier to just say yes to everything, because you don't have to deal with, because that's the local. You're dealing with something local rather than the church. But the problem is, the priest promises obedience to the bishop, but he also promises obedience to the magisterium,
right,
the deposit of faith, canon law. So he can't violate those promises either, even if it means that he might be mistreated by a bishop. But and if a priest is being asked to do something by a bishop consistently that the priest thinks is wrong, and it seems pretty clear that it's wrong, then he's going to have to, after he's expressed it to the bishop, he's going to have to, and if nothing's done, he's going to have to go to the Vatican, or maybe the nuncio.
Right.
the bishop who is like kind of like the ambassador to the bishops of that country or region, and then to the Vatican, in order to defend himself for doing what is right. But you know,
Right,
but just because
yeah.
like he doesn't want to do something, or like I said, even if it's something that seems like a bad idea, he still has to do it. But like I said, that's presuming that he's already explained to the bishop why he doesn't think it's a good idea.
Right.
Because I don't think that'd be responsible to just not say anything. And St. Padre Pio is a really good example. I mean, he was wrongfully treated by superiors, but it was a matter of obedience, and he did obey. And he was, after a while, he was, basically, exonerated, not exonerated, but like the persecution, because it was persecution basically.
Right.
But it was legitimate matters of obedience that the bishop, was calling him to follow, even if the bishop was wrong about why he was doing it.
Right.
So and I think it's important for people to remember to not like attack a priest too much because they think that he's weak or something because he follows what a bishop says to do, because there are times where it's not very clear, and a priest does not want to err on the side of being disobedient.
Right.
Because not just because of the temporal consequences, but because of it could be a mortal sin.
Right.
Because especially because he made a promise, a public promise of obedience. But obedience is not simply just every whim and every desire that we just follow.
Right.
Because it's not that easy, unfortunately. Like we have responsibility and we'll be held accountable by God if we don't resist evil. Especially if a bishop told me I have to, if a bishop told me I have to bless two people of the same sex and give them a blessing, both of them together, I can't. I can't do that.
Right.
Like it's evil. Because I'm giving a semblance of approval to something evil.
Yeah.
And that I give that example because it's probably the most realistic, because there are bishops in the world who are telling their priests that they have to do it.
Oh yeah, like in Europe, because they're potentially schismatic, and you got Father James Martin, who always seems to be in a photo op for that stuff. It's supposed to be spontaneous, but there's like perfect pictures. Anyways, and they're holding hands. Anyway,
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna move past.
I want to get to a rabbit hole there.
No, I know. It just amazes me that nothing has been done on it. So, all right. So, if the church catches on fire or there's some other disaster, are you obligated to retrieve the Eucharist from the tabernacle at risk of your own life? Boom! There's the hammer.
I highly doubt that the church would say you're obligated, because I don't think the church would ever mandate that you knowingly risk your life because of the matter of circumstances that are involved. I mean, I would say generally a priest should, be retrieving, the Holy Eucharist. If the roof is collapsing at the moment, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think you could say God, although he would love it and he would be, just like a martyr. A martyr may enter a situation that they know that they could die easily because of their faith, or they might choose not to enter that situation because they could die for their faith.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're being told to deny Jesus, it wouldn't be okay to deny Jesus, even though that means that you'll be killed.
Right.
But to rescue the Eucharist, I would hope a priest would do that. But I hope in humility too, a priest recognizes that he could say, "I hope I'm able to do that,"
right?
And not be afraid to walk in, knowing that I could die.
Like what comes to mind when she asked that was the one, because we get formed.org for free here.
Not free, we pay a subscription.
Okay,
The
I
parish
do.
pays a subscription.
I do. Okay.
Yeah.
like so. All right. Yeah. So it's, I guess, we kind of in a tax-ish way pay for it, but
Doesn't matter. It's worth it.
right. It is because
Yeah.
like you've got this one resource where it this one particular with what is it? They show the Eucharist, and in
Yeah.
the dramatizations that they show,
So just thinking of
they show of two priests running into a burning building that's very much on fire, and firefighters are saying, everybody, like, don't come, don't come, like, you cannot get closer than these flames because you need protective suits. And you just see two priests out of nowhere just like shoot past them, like right into the flames. And they got the they didn't get the tabernacle, but they got the consecrated hosts and brought them out. And so and then you've got like Saint Tarsius, the boy who ran the Eucharist in the early church. He was like 12 years old. So but okay, so I hope that answers your question. And then our charismatic masses, where they encourage speaking in tongues as a thing to endorse or avoid. Oh boy! All right.
Well, my background, I had my reconversion through kind of that mass I mentioned was they didn't call it charismatic mass, because there's no such thing. It's a mass with prayer for healing afterwards.
Right.
Now, so to be straight up, there is no such thing as a charismatic mass, and charismatic Catholics, that is those who seek to exercise their charisms, the gifts given through baptism and confirmation, who actively are trying to exercise those charisms to make sure they're not just lying dormant. They themselves, wouldn't call it a charismatic mass. Somebody might loosely say that because
Right.
the mass is the mass. It doesn't become. It's not. That's why, like, you have an ordinary form, an extraordinary form of the mass, but it's still the same mass.
Right.
So just make that clear
So,
first.
Yeah, it's probably a lady issue where the lady is just going off on their own doing it.
Yeah, and like that could happen, of course. And I don't think they would encourage people to speak in tongues.
I mean, St. Paul definitely makes it, like, in one of his letters, he devotes a whole chapter to like, you're not really supposed to do that during Mass.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, like I'm saying, you wouldn't encourage somebody to do anything that's optional during Mass, especially because Mass has certain rubrics. There's certain things that you do, and you are to follow those things. If somebody's going to do that, they don't have to do it out loud anyway.
Right. They can do it in very hush-hush.
It's not like you become possessed and have no control. That's not true at all. It can become very distracting for others.
Oh, I was just gonna say, earlier when you were talking about the interrupting of the Mass.
Yeah,
it becomes an interruption of the Mass.
Especially
it becomes a focus on
especially
yourself.
if you realize and it's not necessary. Your salvation doesn't depend on it. There's no reason why you can't do so quietly. For others to not hear, they don't need to hear you. Just like you hear people responding in Mass, they'll say like, "Oh yes, thank you, Jesus." And they probably, some people, if they're older, they may not realize how loud they are.
Right.
If they need hearing aids and they don't have a hearing aid, and they may not realize how loud they're being. You'll hear that a lot. When you hear people just like, and I'm not even talking about tongues. It could just be somebody, just speaking, to the Lord, and they just don't realize how loud they are. That's very different, of course. So I'd say it's important in the Mass to, although I would never say that, because some people will say, well, if they're doing something wrong at one parish, then in order to not cause distraction, just go along with it. Like, I don't know, that opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say I don't care if they're not kneeling and they're supposed to, just kneel. If you're supposed to kneel, because you're doing what you're supposed to do. You can't answer for why they're not doing what they're supposed to do.
Right.
So I wouldn't say that's an exception of something, because you always are justified in doing what you're supposed to do. even if other people don't know better. And if they ask you, then it might be an opportunity.
Right, like because I remember when I was when I was at the college parish in Kalamazoo, I kneeled, and I was the only one kneeling, and oh my gosh, like you get these looks from people, and during the Eucharistic prayer, like you get these looks from people, and they're just like, "What are you doing? Like you're supposed to be standing." But like the complete opposite is true.
People say, "Well, we don't have kneelers." I'm like, "Okay, but I'm okay with kneeling." You can just say, like, I don't, like it's, what you do is going to be your decision, but but
Europe doesn't have kneelers.
even if there aren't kneelers, I'm going to kneel because I'm fine with kneeling. Like if you're not able to do it for some
if you're not
reason,
physically able to do it, that's
that's different. But just because you don't have kneelers doesn't mean I can't kneel. Know.
And okay, so just before we get into the next question, if you have any questions, please put them down. Thank you for watching so far. I know we've been doing this for almost an hour and a half. I think this has been really lively and good, a very good back and forth. And if you are called to help with donating to the Perpetual Adoration Chapel, we would greatly appreciate it.
New question, or a new questioner. You see?
Oh yeah, Sifu. That's a Cephal.
It looks Portuguese. Like it almost looks like a Portuguese little symbol on the S. Anyway.
Yeah. All right. So, what do you say to the Orthodox objection that meditative prayer is forbidden due to the fact imagination came after the fall and is the lowest faculty of the soul that can be manipulated by Satan?
Okay, so we're talking about the Orthodox churches. I mean, I'm not doubting you, but I would question whether the Orthodox actually teach that.
Yeah, because contemplative prayer, I think, is something that they would.
Well, now meditative is different from contemplation, but
okay. So
meditation, you're consciously trying to focus on something. Oh, they said specifically Romanian.
Oh
no, I said the S is Romanian. I'm assuming. I don't think he's talking about Romanian Orthodox.
Seraphim Rose.
Wrote or okay. Anywho.
Okay, sorry. I guess I'm just all right. Whatever. Taught.
Oh, Seraphim Rose taught. Okay, I don't know what that is, but.
Are you saying you're Seraphim Rose taught?
Or is the name, because Seraphim could be somebody's name named after the angels.
Yeah.
But
sorry.
Okay, so I think it might be saying that there's a specific individual who taught that.
Let me. You can go ahead and start talking. I'll look up really quickly the form that he's talking.
I don't. First of all, I'm gonna say off the bat, I can't confirm that because I'm not Orthodox. I mean, hopefully I'm Orthodox in teaching. But I mean, I'm not an Eastern Orthodox, so I wouldn't know because I'm not in that world. But I would say I highly doubt that many Orthodox would believe that because it's a basis of Christian prayer that we meditate, upon the Gospels, upon the incidences in the life of Jesus. I mean, look at a lot of Orthodox churches, there's icons, sometimes completely covering the walls. It's kind of difficult not to meditate upon the mysteries of the faith when they're right in front of you and in your vision everywhere. So I'd say in general, that doesn't seem a very, it says a person is a quote saint. In the
he's a saint. He's a saint.
Okay.
He's no, because I just found out he's a localized saint, so he's not recognized. He's recognized in a particular diocese.
Okay, so this is before the split. This is before, or not before. This is after the split.
Yeah, so this is.
So I can't say I don't. If the Catholic Church doesn't declare somebody a saint.
So this is a localized saint.
Then maybe that would explain why. That's incorrect. That because the Catholic Church would not teach that would not probably canonize somebody a saint who is against meditation because we came after the imagination came out. I don't know if we could say that imagination came after the fall. It just doesn't sound correct because people after the fall of Adam and Eve, because if we have the ability to reason, usually part of the ability to reason and think abstractly involves imagination.
Yeah.
Even for those who, I don't know the term, but can't picture images, they don't picture images in their mind, but they picture words.
Right.
That's still imagination.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about. I don't know
do.
what the condition's called, but
Yeah.
I just think imagination just completely goes hand in hand with the ability to reason. Part of being made in the image and likeness of God. Because that's to have imagination means you have to have the ability to think abstractly. So I definitely would disagree with that objection.
So yeah,
so it's by a specific person.
If it's like a specific meditation, especially of one, it seems like he's only been dead for like 10 years.
Why does the image look so old though?
I don't know. Like that was the.
Unless it's trying to get.
I mean, it's kind of like.
Oh no! It might have been like an icon of a recent.
So first came to whatever.
So
but again,
like I said,
we're also doing
very minor information.
One second, I was just gonna say like we were not like experts.
We haven't researched this. We haven't.
Yeah, this is very. So, but like the idea that meditation is like a problem.
Meditative prayer. That's a good
meditative word. Prayer is a problem. Seems by itself very counter Christian.
We're not talking about Eastern religions here, like because that's not what he seems to be talking about.
Like it just seems because like
that's dangerous, in Eastern religion meditation.
Yeah.
You're not meditating on the mysteries of Christ, then that could be a problem.
Right, but by meditating on the mysteries of Christ, you have to by necessity. But by necessity, it requires you to use imagination.
Yeah.
So like that's really weird. Anyways,
very odd thing. Yeah.
But like that is something I would like to look more into. So I will definitely look more into it. So it's something. I mean, I guess it. I don't want to give the impression that it's like, oh, it's orthodox, it's bad. It's like that's not what we're saying. It's
just individuals.
This seems to be an individual practice, and I would think the Orthodox priest. I'm not really on great terms with him right now because he's in Rochester, but it's because I haven't talked to him that much. But like, I'm pretty sure he would be hesitant to say anything too, definitively, because it's so new, and so like that's I guess like that would be the. I'm not.
And I just like to note, I'm very big on saying like if I don't know a lot about it, I want you to know I don't know a lot about that.
Yeah, because like we don't. First time I've
heard about it.
So. Yeah, this is the first time I've heard.
So everything we're saying about it, but I take that in mind. Although I do see that could be extremely in opposition to basically all the mystics of the church. And
right.
Basic
even
prayer.
Mystics,
the rosary.
Share.
The rosary requires meditation.
Right. So okay. So I don't want to give the impression that it's Orthodox equals bad. That's not what we're saying though. So
it's individual.
Like I'm gonna look more into it, but whatever. All right. So
I'm probably not going to. I'll be honest.
Well, I'll give you. Okay, I'll give you the summary.
So you can. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, what is the greatest heresy that the church endured in your opinion? We're enduring it now. Okay, I'm sorry. So what should the people do when combating errors and heresies? So the reason why I said we're enduring it now is because if you notice, especially if you're on Twitter, if you talk to a lot of Protestants, especially a variety of Protestants, you're literally seeing the resurgence of every single heresy that has ever existed.
Well, not just Protestants, but sadly, more so in the church.
Well, because like you get a lot of lukewarm Catholics that want to make it. There's a lot of reasons why they're lukewarm, but I won't go into my own personal bias, but they're just not being diligent. So that's why I say we're currently going through it now.
Right now it's just a mess. There's nothing organized enough to even say that there's a specific heresy going on right now because there's so many of them. Just mixed all over. But, most of the church would probably say is an Arian heresy.
Well, that's what keeps.
When you're looking at an organized heresy, organized meaning like there are actual people who say, I am this.
Yeah.
Where now you don't get a whole lot of people who acknowledge that the heresies that they even follow. But the Arian heresy, I'd say, because it was so prevalent, the vast majority of bishops at a time were Arian heretics. A lot of the saints were deposed by Arians. Saint Gregory of Nyssa, we talked about, he was deposed, by Arians, by an emperor especially. Then when that emperor died, he was restored to his diocese, and that was just without a doubt one of the most, and it went on for centuries too. Like even if
it's why Islam exists.
Well, one of the reasons, yeah,
it's
a lot of
Islam exists.
Islam emerged in an area of Aryan stronghold.
Right.
So it definitely had an influence on it.
So, just so you guys know, because I think this is incredibly important to understand, Arian heresy in particular is, it's the rejection of Christ as God. It is very similar to Nestorius' heresy, but it's more like God is he is just a man, and he's a favored man of God, but he's not God himself.
Yeah, raised to the dignity of divinity.
Yes,
is more specifically. Although it's not wrong to say that Arianism basically denies the divinity of Christ, because it does deny. If you say that he was raised to divinity at some point after just being a human, then you are denying, because God has always existed,
right?
And so you can't become divine.
And the other thing I wanted to add is one of the things that spread that heresy in particular so well was hymns. So I want to bring that up to today with the crap that we deal with in a lot of parishes. Like sorry, I'm being a little like loose with this in terms of criticality, but it's hymns are so important because hymns teach the faith while we're practicing it. And Arianism is a perfect example of the wrong faith being taught through song in the Mass, and it's spreading everywhere. And we're seeing that today. It's probably one of the reasons why we have such lukewarm Catholics. It's one of the reasons, yeah. But it's something I'm very adamant about. Like,
it
it's one of the
influences
things
us more than we even realize.
Oh, and people play that thing down like so easy. Like, and it's the most frustrating thing. The songs matter, like in Mass, and our children.
And just to quickly say, the songs matter so much because the Mass is the most powerful prayer possible on earth, and if it's the most powerful, most important, then we don't just throw anything into it. Like we shouldn't just throw anything into the Mass without. It doesn't mean we're going to be perfect on everything, but we want to strive. To give the best we can to God.
Right. All right. So I hope that answered that question. Okay. So thank you for answering all these. Okay. Cool. All right. So let's see. If I guess if anybody else has a question, I also have more questions, but I wanted to.
Now we're going to put the youngest child of Ryan in here and see how long it will take before he destroys everything.
No, I don't think so.
I'm not kidding. Speaking of Damien.
Yeah, speaking of Damien.
He is a boy.
Yeah, yes. So yeah, he's at my house. So we're in the basement. You can't tell. But we're So okay, and Sefo said thanks. There is a YouTube channel called Orthodox Ethos. Oh yeah. That uses Rose's argument to criticize Catholicism and the Rosary. It seems to be ridiculous, but people fall for it.
It's consistent with what I said.
Right.
They recognize anyone who believes that.
Yeah.
Would recognize. Well, the Rosary is definitely meditative,
right,
and requires imagination. So at least that's a consistent logic, even though it's false. Though it's erroneous. Those who are Orthodox who do believe that, or you don't have to be Orthodox to believe that either. In the Orthodox Church, I say those who are Orthodox and believe it because I would be very hesitant to believe that the majority of Orthodox would believe that.
Well, right, and they'd have to throw out. It's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater because you'd have to say all of their mistakes. All of their mistakes.
Icons necessarily require. I mean, I wonder if this.
Well, you're talking about a group that's iconoclastic at times.
I was going to say.
So,
is this? You'd also have to be against icons. You know, like this individual seraphim rose.
So I would say the YouTube channel in particular, I've heard of them, but I've never actually watched a video of them. But it doesn't surprise me that Orthodox want to criticize a very long-standing and frankly important things such as the Rosary for us, which, by the way, Our Lady of the Rosary comes from the Battle of Lepanto. What happened at the Battle of Lepanto? Well, the Catholic Church in Europe defeated the Muslims and rescued Christians that were hundreds of thousands of Christians that were captured by Muslims, which I'm pretty sure included the Orthodox, but they weren't able to do anything. But it was that's where Our Lady of the Rosary comes from. In terms of it comes from the Battle of Lepanto because there was a miraculous thing that happened during that battle.
Yeah, when the Pope encouraged people to pray the Rosary.
And so it's this ridiculous thing where well, now we're going to criticize something that God clearly used in an effective way.
And iconoclasm is a heresy, by the way.
Right. Well, yeah. So
the church says it is heretical to say it's wrong to use images.
Right. And so we're because that's how a lot of the church. Most of the church was illiterate during most of the time, and so they would learn through sculptures and images.
Still do.
Right, and so
that's why the bad. The bad ones have a bad influence on us too.
I am super engaged with this particular one just because I don't even pray the Rosary that much. I'm just being completely honest, but it is to say it's not to say it's problematic because it's meditative. It's just such a asinine thing to say.
Yeah, I've been praying in Lent, praying the Seven Sorrows Rosary.
Oh, really?
Yeah, somebody gave it to me, and I thought, okay, I think this is shortly before. I said, I think it's a sign that I should do this. So it's it's 7 Hail Marys instead, and you focus on 7 sorrows. So it's technically 2 less Hail Marys. Yeah, but it's a bigger. It's in my pocket, but anyway, it's just kind of a side comment.
Yeah.
So how powerful is fasting?
So let's go on to the next thing. So I just wanted, I'm sorry. Anyways, how powerful is fasting to our faith?
Well, we know it's very powerful because Jesus mentioned how it was necessary.
For what?
Well, casting out demons.
Certain
demons.
Yeah.
Not always that method. But
I only want to bring that up because I think it's really important that he said demons, because some people are just, when I see some priests, they seem to definitely play down spiritual warfare, and it's just really weird because they're part of the war.
If you read the Gospel of Mark straight through,
it's just you're one of the. You could argue.
Not that it's not present in the other Gospels, but especially the Gospel of Mark. And I would encourage people at some point to try to, because they would encourage us to do that in the seminary sometimes, in one sitting read through an entire gospel. Okay, I can set aside a couple hours or 3 hours. I'm going to read straight through this book, this gospel. And it is amazing. You'll see things that you wouldn't normally notice when you read in one sitting, not stopping, reading through the entire gospel. St. Mark's is the shortest.
Yeah.
So you could try it with that. It's impossible to ignore, all the activity against Satan. And I want to hear the questions from Twitter and stuff too.
Why?
Your wife is reminding you.
I know, but there's.
Is there stuff on Twitter?
I'm gonna check.
So you do that while I'm blabbering on.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, we know that fasting, not just from, although the most important thing is because Jesus shows exactly how there's times when it must be fasting to overcome Satan. We just know from experience too, from a lot of people. I mean, I'll say like that's not one of my strong suits. That's not something I'd like to get better at. And part of it might be because I have low blood sugar and the very direct work of fasting, which strictly speaking, fasting is eating less food,
Right.
or not eating food, to a certain period. And there are other ways to fast, fast from certain things. And that's usually useful for somebody like me, where somebody with like low blood sugar, like you won't function. I won't function very well if I go too long without eating, and it might make me angry or dizzy, or not just. And there should be some discomfort when you're fasting. I mean, it's not really fasting if there isn't discomfort. But you can fast from other things. Preferably, you're fasting for something that's good, or necessary. But there is no doubting that fasting from food itself is definitely the most powerful. There's no doubt, with that, the value of strictly eating, choosing not to eat for periods of time, being prudent about it,
Right.
or strictly eating less for periods of time than you normally would, to the point where it is noticeable, like where there is a discomfort to it. There's no doubt. I mean, even other religions recognize that there's something that it does. It clears your mind. It gets rid of other things.
It helps heal your liver.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's a medical thing, but that's a different thing.
It teaches you how to say no more.
Yeah.
Although you can do that with other things too. If you're just abstaining too, like when we don't eat meat on Fridays, that's actually abstinence. That's not fasting. That's abstaining. But anything you want to add to fasting?
Just be smart about it. Like right now, I can't. What is it? I can't fast the whole day. Like a true, like so like there's the fasting. There's the one big meal and two smaller meals that don't make up a big meal. So that's like what the typical fasting is. But if you try to fast, I don't know. I know, what is it? When I watched Taylor Marshall, I think he used to fast during Lent till 4 or something. Like, I can do that personally, but if I go till 7 or 8, like, I need to have supplements from like electrolytes. So, for example, I have like little packages I put into the water that make sure give me electrolytes, so I'm not like so like out of it. And so because that'll happen, and so that's something you want to like take precautions for. You want to be smart about this. You don't want to put your health at risk, but you also want to make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons too. So that is not to say like losing weight or doing it because you have a particular intention you want to do for. You can do both at the same time. It's just
make sure nobody asks questions on
Twitter
or on Facebook, because I didn't put.
That's a good point.
I don't know if I put it on Twitter.
So my wife is as a clarification. My wife is asking the questions and about the Twitter people, and she doesn't say that. I'm just being facetious. And she's going through OCIA right now, so she just got baptized. And it's something that we're very happy about. We got baptized in a not so ordinary situation, but we'll whatever. Anyways, but she was a pagan for the first 13 years of our marriage, and our anniversary is on this Tuesday, so our 14th anniversary. So she's learning a lot, and that's, she's going through OCIA with our DRE, and she likes to
There's no questions.
ask questions. There's no questions. Okay, so
on the Twitter.
So just wanted to let you know, like
the Twitter X.
Yeah, that's where she's coming from, and it's really cool that she's learning. So I appreciate the fact that she's learning. I just wanted to say that. So okay, I want to hear the blah, 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 because I'm learning blah, blah, blah. All right, so back to Damien. How important is confession? Is it true, as some priests teach, that it should only be done if you commit a mortal sin? So before you answer, I'm just going to say one thing. It is required as a precept of the church that you go to confession once a year.
Yeah, at least once a year.
At least once a year. I don't remember if it's in Lent or not.
And if you want to
at
receive
least
communion,
do it.
then definitely, if you're in mortal sin.
Right. But
And
his suggestion,
if you don't want to die in mortal sin.
his question specifically. So I just wanted to get the bare minimum stuff out of the way. How important is confession? That it only should be done when you commit a mortal sin. So like the other point would be like, all right, well, so say you did a few venial sins. Is it okay to go to confession for that?
Of course. The church does recommend that we go, like, as an example, like once a month. Not as an example, it does say, it recommends. Now, we're only required, that is important to note, we're only required to go to confession once a year, or we're required to go to confession to be absolved of mortal sin. Like, that is absolute. So it doesn't mean that our venial sins can't be forgiven other ways, such as when we receive the Eucharist and the state of grace, when we pray the Confiteor, I confess, Almighty God, etc., at the Mass. But the Church most certainly encourages you to go to confession, even if you don't have mortal sin. It doesn't require it, because the big value of going to confession, even when you don't have mortal sin, is to give you, because every time you go to confession, not only are you forgiven of your sin, but you're given sanctifying grace. So if you don't have mortal sin and you go, you're increasing sanctifying grace. And that's what makes you holy, is sanctifying grace. So receiving the Eucharist regularly, going to confession on a regular basis, those are going to be the primary ways that you're going to receive an increase in sanctifying grace. But also, when you go to confession, it's called a devotional confession. Well, actually, a devotional confession is when you don't have anything to confess, which, praise God, if somebody is in a situation where they don't have anything to confess. Right. I haven't been in that situation, but you can always repeat something you've confessed before, as long as you're clear that you have been forgiven for it, because you have to confess something when you go to confession. There has to be something that you're confessing. You have to have some matter that is sin that you're confessing. So even the fact that there's even something called a devotional confession tells you how fruitful it is, because you're allowed to confess even when you're not aware of sin. Currently, you're allowed to confess a previous one, knowing that you were forgiven for it. But it helps. That's what's going to help you grow in humility. It's going to help you grow in sanctity, because you're used to examining yourself that way. Not just examining yourself, but used to audibly saying your sins to somebody else, even though you're saying it to Jesus ultimately. Obviously, you have to say it to the priest. So although it's not required to go to confession to have venial sin wiped out, it is highly encouraged.
All right, so I hope that answers your question, Damien. All right.
We kind of already answered that.
If you can't fast from food, what are your good alternatives?
That's why I never react comment while she answered.
What how do you answer that?
Well, I said,
maybe you just said
if you can't fast from food, you can. If you can't fast from food, that's already out.
That's already out. Okay.
If you can't fast from food, you can fast from other things too. Like, you can choose to types of food. Like if it's not food overall, it's easy to do that, and you can fast from types of food, things that you don't necessarily need, but you can choose not to have. Although that's more strictly abstaining. It is fasting if you lessen the amount, of something that you normally have that's legitimate, or you can fast from something that is a good thing but the fasting could be a greater value, such as, even if it's reading something good, reading like a book, that is something neutral or even good, you could fast from that as a sacrifice because you enjoy it. Um, but but as I said, I would always emphasize fasting from food itself is going to be the most fruitful. But if you can't do that, then the Lord is going to, of course, He's going to take what you're able to give, what you're truly able to give, not just because you don't feel like doing it. That's not really a good measure of whether or not you can fast. It's if your body, if it damages you, causes lasting damage, or if it makes you too irritable or too angry at people because of your fasting. That's also probably not a good idea either. Then,
If you're pregnant, you're fine.
but yeah, I mean, there's.
But that's she's yes. But like I think the idea of choosing a different type of food is good.
It's almost been 2 hours.
You're right. It has almost it's flying by.
I'm starting to fall. I'm starting to.
Oh, okay. All right. You want to sit in this chair now?
No, the day
Okay.
the day is starting
Okay.
to catch up.
Okay, so we'll go through a few more, and then that'll be it. So all right, since the U.S. You're gonna love this one. So most of our parish kneels, by the way. Since the USCCB, and we have a Novus Ordo.
Oh.
So since the USCCB has asked that we stand for communion, can we choose to receive on the knees and the tongue?
I don't believe the USCCB asks that we stand for communion.
I believe they say it's the norm.
They say it's the norm.
Yeah, and that's
mean
different.
Anything. I mean, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it means nothing. To say it's the norm doesn't really mean anything because the Vatican says you can equally receive kneeling.
Right, like you have a.
Did they say that? So
yeah, didn't they say you have a right to receive on the tongue?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I think the question more is though kneeling.
Yeah.
Like there's receiving on the tongue. That's not even a question. That's actually the standard.
Yes. It is the default as opposed to how
receiving in the hand is a permission. It is actually a permission that's given.
Right.
And not every country has that permission. But like the U.S. has permission virtually to do all kinds of things that nobody else does. But and I'm not going to
deviants.
I'm not going to try to say what because if permission is given, that's given.
Yes. If it's given, it's given.
But the question is more about kneeling or standing. I may say the norm is to stand, but you can just as equally kneel. So in other words, it's I don't want to like write it off, but it doesn't mean much to say that the norm is standing.
Right. What you'll get priests.
In practice, it doesn't mean a whole lot because you are just as much equally allowed to kneel.
Right, and priests will use that. That was actually I kind of go into it, but I'm only going to slightly go into it here for like 5 seconds. At my grandfather's funeral, I had a priest that when I came up to kneel to receive, he said I have to stand, and then I reminded him that.
Now that is absolutely not allowed. No priest can tell you that you have to stand.
Well, yeah, he totally did, and I reminded him that the Vatican said that was not okay, that what he just did.
Because even if you say something's a norm, you can't condemn.
Yeah, and so that was the part where I guess you could argue I interrupted Mass, but it was like reception of communion, so it was just me and him talking, and we were like whispering to each other, but he ended up giving me the communion. Like I didn't do it out of like pride or anything. It was just like I was like, dude, this is like my grandfather's funeral. Like you're telling me to do something I'm not supposed to do, or you're doing something you're not supposed to do, and I'm just like, that's not okay.
Yeah, maybe the priest was told.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we're still dealing with
that you have to, and unfortunately, a lot of people hear things and they may not actually look it up.
Right, and so like
for themselves,
we're still dealing with a lot of, let's just say, leftover conditioning from a previous generation that may have had a very poor understanding of the faith. there's been a lot of cleanup, and I know Sacred Heart Seminary, our seminary, went through a phase of cleanup. And now we have priests like him, and it's awesome. And
a lot of seminaries.
Well, I know a lot of them, some of them, but I mean, like you also still unfortunately have to have bishops that are willing to like support that, and we still have some that are lingering. And all right, so that's a completely different thing, though. Done with questions, and good night. Thank you for sacrificing and answering all of our questions today. So does anybody have any questions? Because I said I would have like 2 more, and that was only 1. So I know you want to go, but I'm trying to help you with penance here. All right. So like,
no, it's not,
I'm trying to.
It's not that I want to go. I can just tell my brain.
No, I know. So okay. So all right. So
and that tells me that it's naturally just things are winding down.
We are East Coast people. So
I mean, my German is coming out. It's been more than 2 hours. 2 hours and 47 seconds. No.
Well, that's a really good accent. All right. So everybody who's been here since the beginning, thank you. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't want people to think I'm reluctantly doing this or anything.
Oh no, yeah. We're totally. Yeah,
I'm just very honest with like I know where I'm at and I know what my brain is.
Yeah, and I can just keep going. And if I had a back and forth with people,
this is the longest I've sat down all day, just to give you an idea. So
wow,
that's probably why I'm tired. So
okay. So if again, if you've donated, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate you donating. We are really trying to get an adoration chapel, a perpetual adoration chapel, where we're at, because where we're at in Detroit, there isn't one
on the east side.
And so we're trying to establish one so that people can go to it on the east side. On the west side and kind of like the central area, there's several, but not where our parish is.
So there's a couple.
Yeah, like St. Anastasia, for example, is I think my closest one.
I don't know if it's absolutely perpetual all the time.
It is. You just you need a code. Now. You need a code.
So ours is going to be like that too, for safety.
Yeah, you're going to need a code because
and cameras and stuff. We'll have that too.
So. But yeah, so that's where we're at, and we just want to say thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you did donate, and if you want to share this to help, like my wife said, she learned a lot from our questions and answering, and that's part of the reason for my channel is to help with understanding either perspectives or actual teachings. I try not to actually say the teachings because I try to have someone who learned theology to say it. I more or less just add perspective. And so you have videos like my, testimonies of women who wear veils. Like all I do is ask them why they wear the veil. And it's just their reasoning. Because I think that's, in a lot of explanations, that's missing. Like you get like the formal answers, but like just ask the women that actually do it and they'll tell you. And so, or my video that me and him did that we receive unconsecrated hosts. I received 100 unconsecrated hosts on the tongue and in the hand. And it shows how many particles fell for both of them. And so that is a very short video. It's, I think, one of my more popular videos, though. And the reason why I bring that up here is because it's just adding perspective that I think a lot of people miss when talking about, in the hand and on the tongue. And so I'm a statistician, so like that was something that came to me during Mass, and he was all for it, and so we did it. So thank you very much for for going through that little monologue of mine, but for listening. And do you mind doing a prayer?
Sure.
Okay.
All right, I don't mind. Lord, be with you.
In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and with your spirit.
Yes, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
It's really late.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
I ask that through the intercession of Saint Basil the Great, as well as Blessed Solanus Casey, all the guardian angels of those watching this, that may Almighty God bless and protect all of you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.
All right. So thank you for watching, and yeah, thanks.
Thank you. God bless.